we work for 5 reasons, one of which is income. The other 4 are identity, purpose, community, and growth. And so what happens is I'm doing work without a job. So job is a silly little artifact. And if you look to 150 years ago, almost nobody had jobs. You did work from home. Then because of manufacturing, electricity, you basically had to come to a central place which had electricity, which had the manufacturing, and you worked near your place. So you basically had jobs and you had a place. And we're going to go from the age of managers to the age of leaders. And a manager is usually also a boss, and we've entered an age of debossification. So people don't need bosses.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Dhanda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. Dear friend, thank you so much for joining me today on the Superpower School podcast. I'm your host, Paddy Dhanda, and today I have somebody who's an author, futurist, and one of the most respected voices in business reinvention. With over 40 years of experience advising some of the world's biggest brands, Rishad has been named by Businessweek as one of the top business leaders and by Time magazine as a marketing innovator. He's the author of the best-selling book, Restoring the Soul of Business, and his latest book is called Rethinking Work, where he challenges us to redesign work to be more human, more purposeful, and more future-ready. He also writes a brilliant weekly thought letter, which is read by over 30,000 leaders worldwide, and he hosts the awesome podcast, What Next? I'm thrilled to welcome Rishad Tobaccowala to the show today. Hey, Rishad, how are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you very much for having me, Barry.
Oh, you're welcome. And as we were just kicking off, I just was in awe of all the books you've got behind you. Like, is there a few shelves higher up as well?
Yes. There are shelves that are higher up, and there are, this doesn't turn completely around, but then there's, on the opposite side, I've got an array of books which are about as, big. And then this is about maybe a third of the books I have.
Oh, wow. Nice. Well, I guess you never get bored, which is great.
Right. And this is the last form of media that I consume in analog form, and it's the one I much prefer in analog form. So only if a book is only available on Kindle, which sometimes happens to some rarer books, I only read in this format. Everything else now I do digitally, excepting, books.
And why is that? What is it that's magical about the physical form of a book?
There are 3 big things. The first one is there's now research that shows that when you read on a screen versus you read on print, you actually learn in a very different way. The second is I like writing on the margins, which I find, obviously you can write on the margins of Kindle, but it doesn't work that well. So this is like, you write at the margins. And then third, once I'm done, it becomes part of a library and furniture. And I can basically quickly access and reach for what I want, when I want, or I walk by. So one of the things I do in addition to trying to read an hour every day, which is what I try to do, an hour of books, not, blogs and Substacks, which I also do, but books. I also try to 2 to 3 hours a week do what I call the library hour. And a library hour is I'll pick one of these things and I'll read the sections that I bookmarked, which I might have done 15 years ago. At a 15-year younger self, why did this gentleman find these things interesting there? Right? So for all those reasons, books are the most amazing. I believe they're the world's greatest technology that has never been superseded. And it has created more revolutions than anything else anybody else has done. And I always say a good novel is the best way to understand somebody else.
Oh, wow. I think I read a similar study in Stolen Focus where they talk
Yeah.
about the way in which we read on a digital device.
It's exactly. Yeah. And also there's no distraction. So like I have a library. So when I'm reading the thing, it's just silence. So I don't have this thing about, oh, should I go look at this other tab or should I swipe or look at the other device? There is no other device. Okay. It's the only one that basically exists. And so it's a big form of like analog. And then obviously then, I like going to bookstores in Chicago because we have two great universities. I mean, lots of great universities, but the University of Chicago is one of the best bookstores in the world. Um, and you can sit there for hours and just go through the stacks. In fact, there's a book about how they made that bookstore, right? And there's a book simply called The Bookstore, and it basically is that if you browse in a bookstore, you're more likely to discover things than if you are searching in Amazon or anything else.
Oh, interesting. And Rishad, for anyone who hasn't come across your work, could you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about your background?
Sure. So I have two careers. The first career was built around a job, and the second career was built around work. And a big part is a lot of people basically believe job and work is the same thing, and it isn't. You can have work without a job. And from time to time, you can have a job and really do no work. But usually, you can do work with a job or you can do work without a job. So for 37 years, though it was in lots of different companies, I worked for the same broad company called the Publicis Group, which is a large advertising, marketing, business transformation, services company, which is about 106,000 employees globally. And I worked in all kinds of areas there. And for the last 5 years, I was on their board, which they call the Director of Plus, and I was the Chief Strategist and Growth Officer globally. So that was career one, which had many careers in there, but it was in one company for 37 years. Career two, which is on Monday will be 6 years old, was when I went from a company of 106,000 to a company of one, which is what you're looking at. And in this particular career, I help people see, think, and feel differently about how to grow themselves, their teams, and their business. And I do it in three ways. One to many, which is a way of saying content. So you mentioned I have a podcast, I have a Substack, and I have two books. And now I have a Rethinking Work YouTube show, which is 4 weeks old. One to some, which is a fancy way of saying speaking, where I do executive offsites, keynotes, and workshops. And one to one, which is advisory, not consulting because that's real work. It's more advisory. So I do the same thing, which is helping people see, think, and feel differently about growing themselves, their teams, or their business. One to many, one to some, one to one. And I basically call it a different type of AI. So if you read me, you'll get accelerated insights. So I promise you that relative to the minutes you spend with any of my content, you'll get more insights than anybody else's content outside of obviously Shakespeare and all that, but in a modern world. Because everything I do is tightly edited because my whole stuff is, I don't understand why you need 5 hours, but I can give it to you in 5 minutes, which is one. Second is, so I call that accelerated insights. My talks are about actionable inspiration. It's not just inspiring people, but making things happen, which is why I work with a lot of companies. And the last one, advisory, is augmented intelligence, which I augment other people's, I'm like a think bot. That makes sense? So it's AI of a different kind. All three are AI, right? Which is sort of different. So that's what I do. And I now been doing that for 6 years. I still continue to advise my original place of work, which is the Publicis Group. So they're one of my advisory clients. And it's a sort of a new career. And so far, so good. But that's what the person said when they jumped out of the 100th floor and someone asked them at floor 50, how are you doing? So far, so good.
I love that. I love that. And look, I saw you at a talk you delivered over in New York when I was
Yeah.
over there for a company event. And I got hold of your book there as well. And that's how I came across your work. First of all, who is the book for and why did you write it?
So I'll start with why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I had always wondered about work, and I started wondering about it about 8 years ago when I wanted to start a new type of career, but without having to work in a company. So what I discovered is that work gives human beings many things. One which is very important and we rightfully probably emphasize a lot is income. So we work for income, for food, shelter, etc. But the reason I was thinking about it is when I started my second career and I was starting to plot my second career, I was fortunate that I had solved for that. So I no longer had to work for income. I like income, but I no longer had to work for income. Did that make sense? And so I told my wife I wanted to do something different. And she basically said, and what are you going to say you do now? Right. So I read a bunch of books and I came up with that we work for 5 reasons, one of which is income, which again is really important. But the other four are identity, purpose, community, and growth. So you go to a place, people ask you, what do you do? Right? You may or may not like the people you work with or at work, but they're a community. Because you have bosses, you have clients, you have crazy people at work, they force you to grow. And when you get up in the morning, maybe playing golf and drinking coffee and just reading books may not be enough. Okay. So what is your purpose? So I didn't figure that part out, but I kept thinking about it, and including during COVID. And I said, what's very interesting is work is so important because it provides all of these things. And if you have good, rewarding work, that plus good relationships and health are the only things that actually matter. But work is going to change more in the next few years than it has in the previous 50. And no one is actually thinking about it. So something central to humans, because of all these things, income, identity, work, community, purpose, and growth, is going to change more between 2020 and 2030 than it has in the previous 50 years. And people are fixating on return to the office, thinking that's what this is all about. So I said, I got to write a book. So that's what this was. And who is it for? It's a very untargeted audience. It's written for anybody, anywhere in the world who has to work, with a slight tilt towards white collar and knowledge workers. Okay. But I've had people who are not white collar and knowledge workers who basically have found it also very useful. Okay. But there is clearly a tilt because I was a white collar knowledge worker. There's this, and it's 50%. And many of these modern changes are more likely to impact for the first time the white collar knowledge worker than the blue collar worker with hands, right? Or their physical presence. So AI is more likely to replace someone who writes code than replace someone who's a massage therapist. And that's why I wrote the book. And I was surprised when I said everybody who works. I suddenly found a new audience because universities were asking me to come and talk to their students because they said, we aren't preparing students for the future of your work, and your book says this is what the future should be. And we should be preparing people for this scenario that you're talking about. And that scenario really has 3 big changes from where it is today. Like if I were to give you sort of there are lots of ideas in the book, but the 3 big ideas in the book are: one is job and work are separate things, and you can actually have work without jobs. And we're going to see a massive decline in jobs, but a massive rise in work.
Okay. Could you
So that's
explain that
what.
for me a little bit more, Rishad? I'm trying to picture how that would work in my world.
So yes, yes. So when I worked at Publicis, I had a job. I was paid very well. That job involved me having a boss, having a salary that came in every 2 weeks, having healthcare, and being beholden to my clients and to my company. And I was a employee at will, so they could decide if I want to stay there or not. But it was the trade-off was I gave them my time and they gave me every 2 weeks salary. And because I was senior, if you did well, you got bonus or equity, etc. So I had a job and I had work and I got paid. This year, last year, okay, I'm paid as more than I ever used to be paid when I had my highest job at Publicis, but I don't have a job. I've flown 52 times this year to visit people and help them, but I'm not on anybody's payroll. I don't have anybody's job. I'm a 1099, right? And so what happens is I'm doing work without a job. So job is a silly little artifact. And if you look to 150 years ago, almost nobody had jobs. We just did work. Whether it was a laborer in farm, craftsperson, you just did work. Where did you did work? You did work from home, right? Then because of manufacturing, electricity, you basically had to come to a central place which had electricity, which had the manufacturing, and you worked near your place. So you basically had jobs and you had a place. Now, both the place and the job have been disrupted, and people are still thinking it's the same thing. So I'm not. So what will happen is that's the first one, which is if you think about it, quite mind-boggling that work and job are not the same thing. And when you think about most companies are nothing but a collection of jobs to get work done. Well, what if I could get work done without jobs? What would a company look like? So the second big idea is companies will look very different than they are today. There'll be many more companies than there are today because it's easier to start companies. There's 6 million companies that started in the United States. And technologies like AI are very enabling and democratizing technologies. Okay. So many more companies with fewer employees. There'll still be large companies, but far fewer, and they'll be much smaller than they are today. So you've seen peak Google, peak Microsoft, not in revenue, not in profitability, but in potentially employees. So the ecosystem of companies will change, but also what a person who works for a company. So a person who works for a company, there will continue to be full-time employees with jobs. There will be freelance employees. There will be contract employees. There will be what I call fractionalized employees, which is going to be necessary in AI age. Someone who works 60 to 80% of their time with 100% healthcare, but only works 60 to 80% and gets 60 to 80% of their compensation. And there'll be alien employees, which is what I call AI. Okay. And you're going to have to artifact all of those together. And most of the work and most of the people who work in the company will either be outside the company or alien life forms. Now, imagine HR processes today versus what that needs to be. Imagine how your finance metrics measure versus what that needs to be. So that's the second big thing, that job and work is not the same. The company ecosystem is going to be different. I call them few whales with lots of plankton, which are some of the small companies. And then the third, which will be another big factor, is how you run and manage and lead a company will be completely different. And we're going to go from the age of managers to the age of leaders. And a manager is usually also a boss. And we've entered an age of debossification. So people don't need bosses. So bosses are about zones of control. Leaders are about zones of influence. And when you have an ecosystem where you have these types of employees working anywhere in the world, you can't do this through a zone of control. It has to be done through a zone of influence. So instead of being a classical conductor where you can see all the orchestra and point to them, this is basically improvised jazz. Okay. And so leaders and managers, which is what your career looks like, the company and the job and thing are changed. Just those three simple things are three of the big ideas in this book. Okay. But for many people, they're so alien. People think I'm like writing about some alien world. And that world is now starting to happen. And people say, how the hell did you know? I said, it was obvious. I said, the only thing I've got wrong in my book is the last 5 chapters describes this ecosystem in detail. There'll be fewer small companies. I mean, lots of small companies, fewer big companies. The big companies will be smaller in size. All of that, I thought would happen. A majority of companies would be grappling with that in 2029. That was my stuff. So the only thing I got wrong, and I just recently did a presentation to Fidelity. They said, what did you get wrong? Because the book is 4 or 5 months old, but because the last time I touched it, because of the editing process, is a year ago. I said, the thing I got wrong is the last 5 chapters. I don't put a date on it, but in my mind, I said, that's going to happen by the end of the decade. It's going to happen in 2027. So the future is coming much faster than I expected. And one of the driving reasons for that is AI is now doubling its capabilities every 7 months, versus when I was writing the book, it was every 11 months. Right. And so that's the key. And so I often tell companies, you have completely lost the clue, which is management. Your whole idea of going back to the office is about as stupid as you can possibly think, because even if you believe going back to the office gives you the benefits of what you really want in an office or in a space is in-person interaction, I'll show you research that says you don't need that to do that 3 days a week. You can actually get that if you probably plan it well, 3 to 4 days a month, okay, and potentially 3 to 4 days a quarter, which will therefore allow you to do what? Program those days. It'll allow you to hire from anywhere, because people just come once a month to a place for 3, 4 days, right? It'll allow you to significantly get rid of your real estate costs. So you're able to work with more talent, faster and cheaper. And you don't want to do that. You want to go back to the 2019 model. How are you going to compete with companies who are starting today? AI first, distributed talent first. And they say, oh my God. So I said, this is the problem with you people, right? You're constantly thinking about the containers of the past. And so that's what this book is, Rethinking Work.
There was moments in your talk that just resonated with me so much. And one of the things was around collaboration. I actually quote you on a couple of things you said there, but you know what, Rishad, surely we should all go back to the office, because that's where all the collaboration happens.
Yes. So one of the key things is I worked in that 37-year career was in the marketing services. So those are businesses which have marketing plans, creativity, all the reasons why people need to hang together and come together. So there are 4 reasons that people give for everyone working together. One of them is people can creatively brainstorm and collaborate better by being together. So number 1. Number 2 is they have serendipity that you bang into people that you normally wouldn't. Third is you can observe things. You pick up stuff just by being in an environment. You see, watch. Fourth, it's really good for building relationships. And then there's a 5th one, which is probably somewhere in the serendipity, and you can pick up stuff, learning. So they'll say learning is the 4th one, right? So learning, chance encounters, creativity, and relationship building. In the agency business, when we wanted to do creative, we'd go off-site to creative brainstorming off-site to give people a new environment to think in. When we wanted to learn, we would go to things like Cannes and Consumer Electronics Show and things like that. When we wanted to build relationships, we'd go to bars and restaurants. There is research that indicates, first of all, most people don't go to a water cooler, they bring their own water. But in my Rethinking Work show, which is a YouTube show that I've launched, the first guest was a professor from Harvard. And his research basically shows that if a person isn't within 75 feet of you, you don't see them. You never interact with them. Okay. And usually the person who's 75 feet from you happens to basically be someone in your same department or area. So actually working in the office makes you less connected with the rest of the company and makes you more incestuous, right? So all the reasons for work is why you should not come back to the office. And then the other thing people say is about culture. And my basic belief is culture is not a spa and culture is not a place. That is a cult. You want a Kool-Aid compound? That's a cult. Okay. Culture is about excellence, open communication, and collaboration with honesty and a growth mindset. Who said that's required in a physical place? So this is the ridiculousness of what this is, right? So now I've got data. I've got Harvard Business School professors with huge amounts of data that show all this. So that was like my first guess. I just had my most recent guess was someone who's based out of London this morning, who used to be the chief operating officer of Google Europe. He runs a thing called the Portfolio Collective. 15,000 people, right, are basically utilizing resources and tools to build a second career for optionality because they don't trust their companies, right? And they need to have different things. And the boardrooms are deaf, and dumb, like Tommy from Who, right? So I have to go there and say, nobody wants to grow up to be like you, and everybody thinks you're stupid. So stop thinking that this is the goddamn model. I don't say it like that because I'll get thrown out of the boardroom. But my whole basic belief is people don't like us. We think they think we're stupid. I can't remember you speaking to the board. You've completely missed it. And if you were to remember your younger self, in fact, this week, my Substack, I'll give you a preview. This Sunday is going to be called Forever Young, right? And one of my basic belief is a lot of people have stopped remembering their younger selves and they're being ossified in their middle-aged or older selves. And they've become their age, and being young has got nothing to do with age. And a lot of these things is people themselves, the leaders, don't want to change. So I said, if you're agile and flexible, how come you don't let your workforce be agile and flexible? If you're talking about the importance of segmentation and personalization, how come you have a one-size-fits model for all your talent, regardless of how they work, what their level is, and what they do? Radio silence, right? So that's the key thing. And this book, very much like my first book, the more people read it, the more they talk to, it's one of these word of mouth books, because it doesn't have a thing. It's got a great title, but it doesn't have the two hooks that you need to suddenly have a book take off, right? And those two hooks are, it's got nothing to do with politics or celebrities. I'm not writing about, Posh Spice or Trump or anybody else. And then the second, it doesn't have lunatic statements and screeds and silver bullets. Like, all work is dead. All companies are dead. I don't say any of that, right? I said the ecosystem is going to change from year to year. There's still going to be large companies, but they're going to be more of like this, right? We're going to be an ecosystem with work and jobs. There's going to be these kinds of things. And so, which basically is, this is how you can manage your career, etc. Versus, take this pill and call me in the morning, right? A lot of books are, do this exercise, it'll change your life. And my own stuff is, do this, it'll help you prepare for the future of work. I'm not sure it's going to change your goddamn life. Okay. But if you actually do this, it may change your life by making you more valuable and viable. And if work is so important, it'll make you more employable, if that makes sense, either by yourself or other people. So that's, what the thing is. And I also remind people, and this is one of the things also on collaboration. So a lot of people today ask me, Rishad, how would you future-proof your career in the world that we're moving to, right? So they said, okay, this is fine. So I said, one of the ways is go read the book. It's now available, in United Kingdom, which is where a lot of your guests, maybe listeners. It's available in India, where I grew up. It's available in the United States, and you can get it in parts of Europe, but it's easily available in those countries. And I said, you can get a book and, spend whatever, £15 or $25 and get it. But I said, the real thing is you have to think about what are the skills you need for the future. And I have called them 6 C's. So I said, you need 6 C's. When you mention collaboration, you'll see it's one of those. So the 6 C's are 3 C's are what you need to do yourself. And 3 C's are what you need to do in order to work well with other people. Okay. So what you need to do yourself to future-proof yourself is what I call cognition, creativity, and curiosity. So cognition is spending an hour every day learning, which is, I say, if you can't upgrade your mental operating system, you're falling behind your silly phone. If you use an Android, it's a 16th operating system. If you use Apple, they just changed the name. So I'm now using something called iOS 26, but it's the 18th operating system. Apple, they changed the name. I've been on the beta. So you have to upgrade your mental operating system. That's the whole forever young, keep your mind going, right? The second one is creativity, which I used to say was connecting dots in new ways. Till on my What Next podcast this Sunday, I spoke with the greatest creative geniuses in the world. His name is Sir John Haggerty, based out of London. He created an agency called BBH, which with people like Levi's and Johnny Walker and Audi on the map. And he's a big embracer of AI. So we talked about creativity in the AI age. And his definition of creativity is expression of self. Okay, so he says, besides music, the highest art form is human life, and humans are creative. And the most creative people, creativity is the expression of self, which is, I was trying to say this, I was trying to show this, I was trying to make this. So if you talk to creative people, I was trying to build this, right? So the whole idea is expression of self. And the third one is curiosity, which is asking what if and why not, and looking forward, because most of the LLMs look backward. So if you got curiosity, creativity, and cognition, which we all have, so you can learn. Everybody's creative in their own way, and you can be curious. So this doesn't block somebody in any way from being, things. But we don't work by ourselves. Sometimes we wish we could, and we didn't have to work with all these other human beings or alien forms, which are the AIs, but we do. So for that, we have to learn how to be collaborative, right? Good APIs, good partnering. Second is I believe all knowledge will be free. Everyone will have the same data. So my ability to convince you will not be only based on data or knowledge. It'll be based on my ability to storytell. So convincing. How do I convince you? I've managed to put a C for a storytelling. So that's a convincing, right? And the last one is, remember when we were growing up, or at least I was growing up, because this whole thing wasn't to exist. But for many years, if people said, what are the things you should learn? People would often tell you should learn Mandarin and learn how to code. Mandarin because of the rise of China, the large population. Code because of the rise of computers. Okay, the biggest loss of jobs today in America is people who know how to code because of AI vibe coding. Coders are still very, very important, but you need less of them because the good ones can do much more, or anyone can do much more. So coding jobs have declined 70% from their height in 2021, which was a little bit of a peak. Your Samsung phone does real-time translation from Mandarin into English. So that's not future-proofing yourself anymore. You know what's future-proofing? Writing and speaking. Learning how to be a good writer and a good presenter. Because if you're a good writer and a good presenter, what does it allow you to do? It allows you to be more convincing. It allows you to be better known and be collaborators. It allows you to express your creativity. And that's the reason, like when we began, people ask me, why do I read so much? I said, I read so much so it helps me become a good writer. Because I said, unless I read great people, how do I know what a good writing is? Okay. And that is one of the things I said, it's old school is cool now. We're learning how to write and speak. And they said, but my AI can write stuff. I said, that's the point. The AI can write stuff. But if I write stuff versus AI writing stuff, and I'll first read the AI stuff. So I'm not saying I'm doing this against AI. This book that I wrote, I used AI, but there's not a single line of AI in the entire book, right? Because the way I wrote the book was I write my own books, but I have a book coach. Because in order to go get yourself these deals with HarperCollins, etc., I learned after my first book, They say, okay, you run a marketing thing. How do we know you can write books? So I don't want to self-publish. I don't want to independent publish. I want to try to get HarperCollins or Penguin Random House. So one of the things I said, look, I've written, I do this thing, but just so you know, I will actually hire a book coach to help me put the book together. Not a ghostwriter, but a book coach. The book coach I selected is a very famous ghostwriter that they know. And he says, this guy knows how to write. I'm just going to coach him. And his coaching was very simple. He helped me put together a book proposal to go get a book deal, find me an agent. But then he says, okay, Rishad, in the book proposal, he said, chapter 1 is about this. He says, please don't write the chapter. Please write the answer to the following 8 questions. So that's the way we start book 1. He says, the next 3 weeks, spend your time answering these 8 questions. And he says, when you're answering the 8 questions, if you're using any sources or data on another sheet, right, send me those links. So obviously say, I got this from here, and then send me the link, because I'll then read those sources too. After 3 weeks, I send it to him. I then take a week off. He takes all my writing and he sends back a chapter. Okay. It's all my words, but reorganized, edited, some of it taken out. And once in a while, his words are stitching things together, when you put the thing together. And he points, he says, these are the sutures, you have to remove them by putting in your own lines, right? For the second book, same book, same everything. He sends me the questions. I put them into ChatGPT and to Gemini, and I get their answers. I then read their answers, and then I start writing. I send him now my answers, and I send him AI answers. He does not use a single line of AI in the entire book, right? He says, your answers are much better. I can see they've been informed by stuff you read from the AI, but yours basically reads like poetry. That reads like computeries. And that's the reason why these things are so important. And I say, just do these. And I say, if you remember, these are available to everybody. What I've just explained to you does not require you to go to Harvard Business School. It doesn't require you to spend a whole bunch of money. And I said, you want to be state of the art in learning about AI, you can do it for $20 or 15 to 17 pounds a month. Because you have to buy one of these premium services, either I recommend either ChatGPT or Gemini, but Claude is the third one of those 3. I, of course, use all of them, okay, because I can, and it's fun, okay. But the reality of it is, when people say, I can't do it, I said, why can't you do it? This is your entire future. It's $20 to $40 a month. So you're telling me you don't care about your future because you don't have an hour a day to learn, or $20 to $40 a month? And you want me to take you seriously that you're a world-class player, or you can remain a world-class player? You're a joke. I don't say it like that because it's demeaning. But what is that, right? And so a lot of people say, we can't do this, I can't do that. I said, stop practicing self-oppression. You can do anything you want. Okay. I said, who told you you can't? Now, there's certain things you can't do. If I wanted to be a basketball player, it won't work out. Okay, I'm 5'6". I don't have to play basketball. If you send me to basketball camp, I'm still 5'6", and I'm not naturally athletic. So I could pretend to be a basketball player, but I can't be a great basketball, right? But in your range, everybody has some capabilities. They can be very good at it. And so that's part of the whole thing. Is one of the recommendations in the book is there's a very famous song by a lady called Carrie Underwood. And she wrote a country music, very good song called Jesus Take the Wheel. And basically, she's lost and she doesn't know where to go. She says, Jesus, take the wheel, right? So this is not a thing against Carrie Underwood or Jesus or religion. But I tell people, when it comes down to your career and your future, Jesus should not take the wheel. HR should not take the wheel. You should take the wheel. Okay. And I said, do not blame other people for why your career is not thriving. You're the driver. Improve your driving skills. Do not outsource this, and definitely don't expect Elon Musk and Tesla to take you somewhere. Okay. So get ready, for yourself. And a lot of people don't do that. I said, you're spending all your time doom scrolling. How's that going to help anybody? How is that going to make you better? Feeling worse about yourself and feeling worse about other people does nothing. All it does is internal corrosion, right? And so a lot of also what I eventually do is eh, eh, central, when a lot of people are somewhat disgruntled, I'll always find it's about health, relationships, or work. Those are the three factors. Everything else is relatively, obviously, if you've got health issues, it can be really challenging. If you have relationship issues, that can be really challenging. If you don't enjoy your work, you don't feel productive at work, you don't feel useful at work, that can be really challenging, right? And I always say, okay, it's these three. And then I say, okay, I'm not a therapist, so I can't help you on the relationship thing. On the health thing, outside of preventive stuff like, eat moderately, sleep well, and exercise a bit. The only other thing I could say is basically believe in science, take vaccinations, and go visit the doctor. That's my total thing on health. Like, there's nothing else I can say of that. On work, I can write a whole book, right? And because they're connected, and the really interesting connection is this: if you've got purposeful, rewarding work, you are very likely to live longer and have better health and have great relationships. Because if you've got purposeful, rewarding work, it's less likely you go home and kick the dog, right? Or drown your sorrows with drink in the night. Or take out your belligerence that your bosses give you at work at home. So work becomes so central that comes back, to the central thing of the thing. And it's so simple. So I put that whole artifact, together in the book. And then to make it easier for people to understand. So I have this rethinkingwork.io website where it's me talking about the book to different people like you and other people. So, podcasts, conversations, discussions, because different people ask me different parts. So there's different things. The book only can contain so much. So now there's other stuff I've learned in the last year. But then it became very clear to me, like, that's pretty stupid. Why are people only asking me about work? Like, I'm not the only person who knows about it. So I turned it around and now I invite different people every week to talk about work. Right. So the 4 episodes are up there. Today I taped 7. So it's every Wednesday. But my first guest is a Harvard Business School professor who's written a book called The World is Your Office, Work from Anywhere. And he has a whole bunch of data, including how to create cultures, communication, and knowledge sharing in a distributed environment, which is one. My second guest is somebody who says, if the future is about work and not jobs, how do you actually build the skills? So he's launched things for skill development called Career Bird. My third guest basically says, if in-person interaction is important and you want people to come back to spaces, the spaces have to be redesigned. So he's a creative architect who's now working with large companies to redesign spaces. So when people come together. The fourth is the CEO of a creative agency who heard me 2 years ago when I was trialing my book before I'd written it. And I went to him and I said, this office of yours is going to be in the Smithsonian like a horse and carriage. People are going to look at these offices 15, 20 years from now and look at these offices like a horse and carriage. And he basically, after that meeting, called me and said, that made me really think. In the next year, he got out of all of his leases, got new leases, but with a new mindset. Instead of thinking about leases and space, he thought about hospitality, right? Instead of basically people coming to a place of work, he said, I'm going to give people a place of energy and enlightenment. So I'm going to have other people come in. I'm going to recognize that people are going to work differently and that people are going to, even in the company, work with a computer. So I'm going to focus on ceilings and backdrops, because when you're on Zoom, it's a perpetual selfie. So what's behind you matters, because laptops are like that. What's on the roof matters, right? So, and his company has grown business and has been the best place to work for 2 years in a row. And I'm having an Israeli guest who's creating agents, a CEO of a company who's created agents. Today, as I said, I work with this guy who's created the Portfolio Collective. And then I found the best writer on Substack about the future of work. And I had him on my show. He's based in Lisbon. He writes a thing called Work Futurist. And so my whole stuff is I'm going to talk to you, all the different people about the future of work who are writing about it, speaking about it, thinking about it. Some of them are in alignment with what I write. Some of them are not in alignment with what I write. But I said, people should see this framework, right? But in also doing that, I'm also basically, when people say like, okay, you have a Substack, you have a podcast, you've written 2 books, you've traveled 52 times, you speak, you advise, how big is your company? And I said, this is it. I'm my executive assistant. I'm the boss. I'm the employee. The boss doesn't like the employee. The employee doesn't like the boss, right? I'm my agent. I'm my accountant, my everything. And I said, I'm just showing you what the future of work looks like. And I go to boardrooms and everything. And then people suddenly wake up. And I said, by the way, I'm older than all of you. I'm on goddamn Medicare. So don't tell me you all are too old to do this, right? That is the entire thing. So a big part of it is eventually the reason I become believable is I eat my own dog food. I'm doing the stuff that I'm saying can be done, right? But I'm also basically showing them multiple models. I'm working with a very large company, my old company. So I'm not saying companies are dead. I'm not saying big is dead. I'm not saying any of that. And that's what people want. They want some slogan. And my whole stuff is work is too goddamn complicated for a slogan, except if you think about it like this, which is most work will be done outside, be of fewer large companies, more companies, and work and jobs are disconnected. You want a slogan, I'll give you those 3. But then you have to think about that. I'm not giving you an answer. I'm just saying this is the ecosystem. Now you have to figure out the answer based on what needs to be done. So hopefully that's helpful.
Rishad, I don't think I've ever been this quiet on an episode. I was just sat there, just taking it all in, and I didn't want to jump in at any point
Right.
because there's just so much goodness coming out. And look, something I've been contemplating with a lot. So my daughter just turned 16.
Yep.
She's just finished her high school exams, and she's kind of going on that next step of her education, which will be at college. And I've really struggled as a parent to try and offer her any advice. Years ago, I could have given her some of that advice, learn Mandarin, do some coding, because I had some insight into what's happening in the future, or I worked in that space. Right now, all bets are off. I have no idea. And she's a really creative person. She's amazing at art. And she turned around to me and she said the other day, she said, Dad, I hate AI because AI has just ruined my career. The thing that I wanted to do, the thing that I love, it can do it all. So there's no point me doing it. So can you help me here, Rishad? What should I be saying to her? And I'm sure other people have got young children and teenagers and kids, and they're probably in a similar boat trying to figure out what can they do or say to those children.
So I would basically say that, first of all, what I would ask your daughter to do is listen to my most recent What Next podcast, because it's called AI. Sorry, it's called Creativity in the Age of AI. Because she says this machine can do it or whatever. So is there going to be creativity in the age of AI? Is there going to be a thing for people who create stuff because machines can do this? So that's the one where I spoke to Sir John Haggerty, right? And he basically says this is going to unleash more creativity and better creativity, but AI should be thought of as a collaborator, right? And that now everybody becomes a creative director. In the old days, there used to be art directors and copywriters. He says now with AI, you're a creative director. And his whole basic belief simply is that this is not just a tool, it's a collaborator. It's very democratizing. So to a certain extent, now your daughter doesn't require people's permission. She can now create her portfolio. She can distribute it. She can use the latest technology. And she can be both a company of one while waiting to go get a job. And this we don't talk about in the interview, but Gary Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue. So he could have basically said, I've given up chess. What he discovered was he plus Deep Blue could always beat Deep Blue. Okay. So the idea basically is your daughter plus AI tools will basically make her better than AI tools alone. And usually, and this is something for her to recognize, is history basically says every advance in technology places a premium on superior ability. What do I mean by that? It basically means that I'm a very good writer today, and I have a particular advantage in the fact that now I can self-publish and self-distribute utilizing Substack. Obviously, I don't self-publish and self-distribute in a different way, which in my book, I do the old-fashioned way, but I can do it through Substack. So I can reach a lot more people. I have this amazing tool, which allows me to, if I want to meld video and audio and words and pictures, I just do words and pictures, but you can do a whole bunch of other stuff. So I was a book writer, now I have this thing, so I'm expressing myself in a different way. I could make my AI write the Substack, but as I just showed you, I could do better. AI write, but now let's suppose it wasn't me, but it was with Substack. It could be far better than I. Because all that Substack is, it's a lever, but the talent is him. And this leverages talent. So tell your daughter that AI allows her to turbocharge her talent versus replacing her talent.
Yeah, such a great point, Richard. I mean, similarly to what you were saying about writing, right? If you've
Yep.
done all the homework, you've read those books, then AI can be leveraged to help you, but you'll always have
Exactly.
some extra insight, right?
It always makes sense. So someone actually told me, they said, why are you saying writing is one of the skills? I said, can't AI do that? So I said, here's the deal. I said, you just bought my book. So I said, why don't you go and look at this particular, I just picked out I said, you can pick out any page, but this particular thing, I basically said, go look at this particular page in the book. And it's a page where the fact I'm trying to make is that in order to have successful careers, you need to align with trends. Okay. So I could have basically said, to have a successful career, you want to align with the trend. What does that mean? Which basically means don't try to sell typewriters in an age of computers. Okay. Because you're not on trend. People are basically buying digital word processors right? So you could be a great typewriter salesperson, but there isn't a big market for typewriters excepting for set designers and other things. There is a thing. So if you align with the trend, it's a lot of your career. So I could simply have said that. But instead, I basically said, in Julius Caesar, there is a line called take the current when it serves or prepare to lose thy endeavors. So I have a part of Julius Caesar. So as 500 years ago, Julius Caesar, Shakespeare basically said, if you want to be successful, right, align your ventures with the tide or prepare to be flooded out. But if you did not read him 500 years ago, more recently, 500 years later, George Lucas in Star Wars basically said, may the force be with you. That's so much more interesting. Julius Caesar and George Lucas Star Wars, right? May the force be with you. Take the current when it serves to prepare to align, right? And I said, therefore, you need to align with the trends. That's very different than AI saying, and with the trends. I'll leave you with that. Perfect.
Oh, brilliant. Richard, I have a closing question that
Sure.
I ask my guests right at the end, and I'm really interested to know your answer on this. So if you had any superpower to abolish something in the world of work, so we're going to remove it, what would that be? What's the thing that really, I guess, maybe frustrates you about the world of work?
The need to get permission from a boss. I got rid of the boss. Okay. I truly basically believe that we have to enter the age of debossification and we need to be our own bosses. However, we do need leaders, guides, and mentors. But I don't need someone who monitors, delegates, measures, and allocates. That has to stop.
Sounds good to me. Although I have an amazing boss right now,
Yes.
so I don't want to get rid of
I had
him.
an incredible boss too, but I'm just saying that's a bossless world, but a world with mentors, guides, and teachers is better.
Got it. Excellent. And so as we wrap up, Rishad, so what's the book called? Just to remind people, I've got it right here.
So the book is Rethinking Work, and if people go to rethinkingwork.io, they can basically know more about the book, and there's a place where you can buy, and it's available, on all the offline and online places in the United Kingdom, United States, India, and a few other places. And if you don't have time or money to read the book, go to the website, learn a bunch of stuff. And you can obviously read my Substack, which is free at rishad.substack.com. Or Rethinking Work has the Rethinking Work show, so you can hear different people talk about work. And then I have a podcast called What Next, which you can simply find What Next Publicist Group on any platform.
Oh, brilliant. And I'll try and gather as many of those links as I can to put in the show notes as well. So
perfect.
Rishad, thank you so much. It's been mind-blowing, honestly. I've learned so much, and I feel a lot wiser than I did at the start of this conversation.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the support of the book. Thanks for having me on. And my book is growing word of mouth one by one. So this helps. You having me talk helps tell people about it. And I hopefully this will become one of those, like my first book. It just grows and grows and grows.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.